I still remember the sound of that meeting room door closing. That soft, sharp click that tells you something heavy is about to unfold. It was supposed to be friendly, just a partner review, a simple chat about where our project was heading. But by the second cup of coffee, you could almost taste the tension in the air. Every sentence started with, "The problem is," and ended with, "You never listen." You could feel the temperature rising, words getting quicker, sharper, harder. And in the middle of that storm, something inside me said, "Enough." I stood up, grabbed a marker, and drew a line straight down the whiteboard. "Okay," I said, trying to breathe some calm into the room. "Let's stop talking at each other and start seeing what we're actually talking about." On one side, I wrote goals, on the other, fears, and for a moment no one said a word, just the sound of the marker squeaking on the board. Then, slowly, things began to shift. Not because we'd solved the issue, but because the fight had turned into a drawing. And drawings, unlike arguments, have edges you can see. That's the funny thing about conflict. It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just fog. You can't see where you're standing or what you're aiming for. You only know that you keep bumping into each other in the dark. That morning I realized something I'd never seen so clearly before. You can't shout your way out of fog. You have to map it. So we started writing. On the goals side, he scribbled, "Grow users, improve retention, keep the product simple." I added mine, "Stability, quality, team focus." Then we moved to the other side, the fears. His were losing speed, missing opportunities. Mine were overloading the team, burning out developers. And when we stepped back, something quiet happened. We both saw the same pattern. Both lists were reaching for the same destination, a product that lasts. We'd been fighting about how when we already agreed on why. That one board didn't just save a meeting, it saved a partnership. Driving home that night, I kept thinking about that moment, how a simple whiteboard had done what 2 hours of arguing couldn't. Why did one line of ink have more power than 100 carefully chosen words? And then I remembered a line I once underlined in Dale Carnegie's old book. "When dealing with people, remember you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures of emotion." That sentence hit different that night, because I realized when emotions take the wheel, logic doesn't disappear, it just slides quietly into the back seat. But the moment you draw something, emotion steps aside for a second. It lets your eyes take over, and vision calms the storm. A week later, I saw it happen again. This time, not in an office, but in our living room. My wife and I were tangled in one of those classic married people debates, the kind that starts with, "I just think we should," and ends with both of us too tired to remember what we were fighting about. Sleep schedules, budgets, timing, all the ordinary stuff that turns saints into negotiators. And right in the middle of it, I laughed, half out of exhaustion, half out of self-defense. "Wait," I said, "let's use the canvas." She raised an eyebrow. "The what?" "The conflict canvas," I said, already reaching for a pad of paper. We drew 3 boxes: what matters, what limits us, and what overlaps. Under what matters, she wrote, "Rest for the baby, calm evenings, predictability." I wrote, "Financial balance, shared time, peace." Under limits, she added, "Fatigue, babysitter costs, work calls." I listed, "Travel schedule, groceries, no backup." And when we looked at the overlap, there it was, big, clear, almost funny. We both wanted the same thing, a rested child and a calm home. Different routes, same destination. The argument melted right off the page. What was left wasn't anger. It was a plan. It's strange how something as humble as paper can disarm pride. Once you write something down, it stops being you versus me and becomes us versus the problem. And that, my friend, changes everything. A few months later, I saw the same quiet miracle happen again. This time, in the middle of a neighborhood meeting about our shared playground. It was supposed to be a quick discussion, maybe 30 minutes tops. But within 10 minutes, it started to sound like a town hall on fire. One neighbor wanted more benches, another worried about noise. Someone else was upset about safety and budget. Voices overlapped, faces tightened. That slow slide from conversation into confrontation, I knew it too well. So I took a breath and asked, "Does anyone have a big sheet of paper?" A woman handed me one from her tote bag. We taped it to the wall, grabbed a marker, and wrote 3 words across the top. Goals, limits, shared space. Then I said, "All right, let's write, not argue." At first, it felt awkward, but soon people started calling things out. Safety, cleanliness, fair use, budget, timing. I wrote each word down, one after another, until the page looked messy, crowded, honest, alive. And as the words filled the space, something remarkable happened. The room got quieter. People leaned in instead of pulling back. The fog had turned into a map again. One neighbor looked at the paper and said softly, "I didn't realize we actually agree on most of this." And she was right. The longer I looked at that page, the more I saw a truth I'd missed for years. We fight hardest with the people we're closest to, not because we're different, but because we're standing on the same ground and can't see it. That's what the canvas does. It makes the ground visible. It shows us that beneath all the noise and ego and fear, most of us want the same things: peace, progress, respect, belonging. And once you can see that, it's hard to keep fighting. You start to notice the pattern everywhere once your eyes adjust to it. At work, with friends, even inside your own family, the same dance keeps repeating. 2 people standing on the same truth, just facing it from opposite directions. A co-worker you clash with? You're probably defending the same value, maybe responsibility, maybe quality. You just define it differently. A parent you can't seem to convince? You both want security, but one calls it freedom and the other calls it control. A friend you argue with? You both want respect, but you express it in different languages. And as long as that stays invisible, the tension keeps growing. But once you can see it, once the motives and meanings are out in the open, the argument loses its oxygen. It can't breathe in the light. That's why I always tell people, when conflict starts heating up, don't rush to talk louder. Change the layout. Move from across the table to beside it. Draw together. Write together. Because when you sit shoulder to shoulder, your brain recognizes something ancient and human. We're on the same side. The conflict canvas does exactly that. It turns confrontation into collaboration. It invites both people to step out of their corners and meet in the middle. Not to surrender, but to see. And when that happens, pride softens, logic returns, and empathy, the quiet hero of every relationship, finally has room to breathe again. It's hard to fight someone who's holding the same pen. So, how do we make this real? Not just a nice story, but a habit that lives in the middle of real tension. Let me show you a simple way I've been teaching teams, families, even couples to use what I call the conflict canvas method. It's not a trick to win an argument. It's a way to stay human while solving human problems. Step 1. Draw before you argue. When the air starts getting heavy, pause the talk. Grab a single sheet of paper and draw 3 clear sections: goals, constraints, common ground. Now, start writing. No typing. Handwriting slows the brain just enough for empathy to catch up. In the goals section, write what each of you actually wants. In constraints, write what's in the way: fears, limits, pressures. And finally, in common ground, leave it blank for now. That's the part you'll discover together. At first, it might feel awkward, but as the words appear on paper, emotions begin to land. Because when thoughts leave your head and take shape in front of you, something shifts. Your nervous system sees a mirror instead of an opponent, and it's hard to yell at your own reflection. You'd be amazed how quickly frustration turns into curiosity once a marker hits the page. Because now, instead of proving who's right, you're both trying to understand what's real. This simple act of drawing slows time just enough to invite compassion in. It tells your body we're not fighting a person, we're solving a puzzle. That's the first and most important step. Draw it before you debate it. Step 2. Turn overlap into action. Once the shared pieces start to show up, circle them, say them out loud. So, we both care about... That one simple sentence changes the chemistry of the room. Literally. Your brain releases a small dose of oxytocin, the hormone of trust, connection, belonging. And suddenly, you're no longer defending ground, you're building it together. Then ask, what's one small thing we can do right now that supports this overlap? Not a grand solution, just one shared step. Because momentum heals faster than perfection ever will. And when you move from talk to action, the fog begins to clear. Even a single line of progress brings light into a dark conversation. Step 3. Assign ownership in the moment. Before you walk away, choose one next step and write one name beside it. That's it. Ownership turns understanding into motion. Maybe you'll handle the follow-up call and they'll draft the next proposal. Maybe you'll gather feedback and they'll schedule the next meeting. The point isn't control, it's commitment. Because empathy without action is just sentiment. But empathy with action, that's progress. And remember, resolution doesn't mean agreement. It means respect. It means being able to stand on opposite sides of an idea without walking away from each other. Sometimes the best outcome isn't we see it the same way. It's we see each other clearly. Let me tell you about a moment that proved this to me. Not in theory, but in real life. Years ago, I was coaching 2 startup founders who were seconds away from breaking up their company. 2 brilliant minds, both exhausted, both convinced the other just didn't get it. The air between them felt like glass about to crack. I let the silence sit for a bit, then slid 2 markers across the table. Draw it, I said. Your version of success and your biggest fear. They looked at me like I'd just asked them to dance in a storm. But eventually, one of them stood up, then the other. And for the next 20 minutes, they drew timelines, circles, arrows, numbers, sketches of what the future looked like in their heads. When they finally stepped back, we all just stared at the board. Because what one of them had drawn as success, fast growth, loud expansion, was exactly what the other had drawn under fear. And the reverse was true too. They laughed, not sarcastically, with relief, because for the first time in months, they didn't feel like enemies. They just saw the misunderstanding. They didn't need therapy. They needed visibility. That company went on to thrive, not because they stopped disagreeing, but because they learned to disagree on paper. And that lesson kept echoing in my life. One evening, my daughter came home from college, upset about a fight with her best friend. Tears, frustration, silence, the whole storm. I handed her a notebook and said softly, "Draw it." She rolled her eyes the way daughters do, but sat down anyway. She drew 2 columns, her side and her friend's, and in the middle, she drew a heart. A few minutes later, she sighed, "We both just want to feel heard." The next day, she called her friend, and what could have become a wall turned into a bridge. Laughter replaced silence. Sometimes love just needs a diagram. The more I saw it, the more I realized this wasn't just about fixing arguments. It was about how the mind heals itself when it can see its own storm. Psychologists call it externalization, putting inner conflict into a visible, shared form. It lowers defensive reactions by almost half, because suddenly your emotions aren't trapped inside your head. They're on the table, where both hearts can see them. That's why even couples therapists keep markers close, not to draw art, but to draw clarity, because emotion feels endless until you give it edges. And here's the beautiful part. This doesn't only work with others, it works inside you. When I can't decide between 2 paths, to move forward or to pause, to say yes or to say no, I grab a piece of paper and make the same 3 columns: goals, constraints, overlap. And every single time I find something humbling. Even the voices that argue inside us want the same thing: to protect us, to guide us, to keep us safe. They just speak different languages. One speaks of safety, the other speaks of growth. And when I draw them both, I stop feeling torn between them. I start leading them. A friend of mine, a senior nurse at a busy hospital, told me she uses this method with her team every week. Before any major decision, they draw a small grid on the whiteboard. What we want, what we fear, what we share. She said it saves us hours of arguing. The moment it's on the board, people calm down. Because clarity isn't just visual, it's emotional oxygen. And that's the heart of this whole idea. Conflict in any form isn't a failure of communication, it's a failure of visibility. When you shine light on intentions, suspicion fades. When you make motives visible, respect returns. And nothing shines brighter than shared ink on a white page. I once watched a group of engineers, designers, and marketers, 3 tribes that usually speak 3 different dialects, solve a 6-month standoff in under an hour with nothing more than a flip chart. No mediator, no fancy framework, just a single sheet and a few honest strokes of ink. By the end, one of them leaned back, exhaled, and said softly, "I didn't know you cared about that too." And in that moment I thought, that might be the shortest peace treaty in human history. Because the truth is, we don't need to be identical to understand each other. We just need a way to see what the other person means. If Dale Carnegie were alive today, I think he'd smile at that, because he taught us that influence begins with understanding, and understanding begins with listening. The conflict canvas is listening you can see. It's the art of slowing down long enough to draw what you mean, and to invite the other person to draw beside you. So the next time tension rises, at work, at home, in a friendship, pause the talk, grab a page, divide it into 3 parts: goals, constraints, overlap. Write together, not separately. Watch how quickly walls turn into white space, words turn into lines, lines turn into clarity, and clarity always, always turns into peace. You don't need to be an artist to draw your way out of conflict. You just need to be willing to put the fight on paper where both of you can see it. Because the real masterpiece isn't the drawing. It's the relationship that survives because of it. Every argument is a fog looking for form. When you draw it, you give it shape. And once it has shape, it can finally move. Conflict isn't a fire to fight. It's a fog to clear. And sometimes all it takes is a single line drawn not between you and me, but between us and the problem. Tomorrow may never come, but today is here, waiting for you to pick up the marker and finally see each other clearly.